me try this. Can everyone hear me? Great. Okay. First of all, I wanted to thank the organizers of the conference for having us here today and for creating a space to have these really important conversations about Estero Bay and the watershed. Today, let me introduce myself. I'm Nicole Iadevaia. I am the Research and Outreach Manager for the Coastal and Heartland National Estuary Partnership. So Jennifer Hecker, our Executive Director, was up here earlier. She gave you a little bit of a background about what the CHNEP is and what we do. So I'm going to just breeze past that part, and today I'm going to talk about what is our plan for habitat restoration needs in Estero Bay area, and how it relates to local projects that are going on. And I'm going to sort of dovetail with some of the information you've heard from previous presenters as well. So, what is our plan? Well, the CHNEP has an overall comprehensive conservation and management plan, which is a mouthful, but essentially it's our 5-year strategic plan for implementing these 4 main actions you see up here, which is reducing nutrient pollution, restoring hydrological flow, protecting wildlife, fish, wildlife, and habitats, and public engagement. We actually have a full copy of this plan in the back if you want to look at it, or some summaries of it as well if you'd rather have the Cliff Notes version, and it's also on our website. So I'm going to focus today specifically on the protecting wildlife and habitat portion of the work that we do. So in order to work on this, we created a habitat restoration needs plan, which is right now in report format, to sort of outline exactly what we were looking to do, and then sort of make the roadmap for how we're going to do it. So the partnership came together and created a vision, which is a diverse environment of interconnected, healthy habitats that support natural processes and viable, resilient native plant and animal communities. And so the objective is to permanently acquire, restore, and manage natural and terrestrial and aquatic habitats. So and then we needed to lay out the strategy of how we're going to go about doing this. So we wanted to promote and facilitate permanent acquisition and effective protection and management of natural habitats, including some of the things that Brad went over: wildlife dispersal areas, movement of habitat migration corridors, wetlands, flowways, and as well as environmentally sensitive lands and estuarine habitats. Okay. So who implements this plan? Because that sounds like a really big plan, right? So the CHNEP, the last word in that is key, is the partnership. We are a partnership of 10 counties, 15 cities, US EPA, Florida Department of Environmental Protection, 2 water management districts, 2 regional planning councils, a number of NGOs, and this plan was built by this partnership. And this was everyone coming together and saying, okay, what do we want to work on, and how can we move forward together to work on this? So everyone is collectively working on this plan in whatever way that they can. Okay, so why do we need it? We basically, we thought it would be good to have a vision for overall protection rather than piecemealing things together. We want to look and say, okay, what is our strategic vision, like I went over earlier, and how do we increase acreages of native habitat in the CHNEP area, both strategically and opportunistically. So strategically, we mean balancing restoration and acquisition with continued economic growth. We can't preserve and restore everything. We need to have places for ourselves to live as well. And opportunistically, opportunities arise with landowners that may want to turn a parcel into conservation easements, or also new funding sources may arise for restoration opportunities. So that's really what it's looking at. We wanted to make it realistic and achievable in our plan. So in our report, which I'll kind of go over a little bit of a background about that later, we wanted to set out real targets and opportunities using the best available data and scientific modeling for the future. So I won't go into too much detail about how we gathered the best available data, but I will say it was an exhaustive search. There's a lot of places that have assembled maps for conservation lands that they have, conservation easements. Jim Beaver went over how the Regional Planning Council went out and actually mapped private conservation easements, which is difficult to do, but it's important to have. You know, cities and counties all have their own maps. There's also, you know, NGOs that are preserving and acquiring lands. And so there was, needless to say, a lot of data that went into creating these maps. And so we pulled all of the maps that all of the partnership could provide or put together. We went online and we put them all in one spot. Because what we wanted to do, and we also pulled in some older maps as well. We looked at historical soil distributions because we wanted to look at, okay, what was going on, what had happened, where we are now. We needed to map those two things first to determine where we're going. So that was part of the mapping process. And then we also wanted to look at, okay, so how do we plan for where we're going? How do we look into the future? We need to accommodate, again, like I said, we need to accommodate economic growth and development. And then we also need to think in our forward-looking vision, how do we accommodate for the impacts of climate change, most notably sea level rise, and how that's going to affect where habitats are going. You know, they live one place now, but we believe that they will be migrating upslope in response to sea level rise. So I'm going to give you, the next couple of slides are some examples of what our sea level rise modeling was. That's not the full report, it just gives you a little bit of a background on how we modeled that as well. And it's just pretty interesting to look at. So we used the habitat evolution model, and a little bit of background. We used the NOAA sea level rise projections, and then we also went with low sediment deposition rates from the rivers. Rivers in Southwest Florida aren't known for high accretion rates, essentially. So this is a map of the current habitats as of 2016 when we started this project. It took about 2 years to finish, actually, and now we're working on an addendum. So this was a pretty major project and a pretty major undertaking. So I just want you to note that, so all of the different habitats, you don't have to be able to read that key in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, but essentially red is mangroves. And so I would say key in on mangroves and watch that as I scroll through these maps really quick. And you can see how habitats shift in response to sea level rise. All right, so this is 2040, 2070, and you can see, you saw how the mangroves already started here, and now they're starting to move up. And now when you look at this 21-20 projection, essentially what's happening is these habitats are migrating upslope, but then they're also running up against some hard development. So they run the risk of getting pinched out. So that's something that we needed to accommodate for when creating this plan and creating spaces for those habitats to migrate, those important habitats that we need to preserve, while also preserving you know, the freshwater wetlands and then of course the uplands as well. So there's a lot of things to think about when you're looking to improve the area for the future as well. So when we created these maps, we put everything into 4 target categories, essentially. So it's sort of an iterative process, right? So you have to first preserve or conserve land before you can manage or restore it, right? So we started with our preservation and conservation. We call these opportunities. They're opportunities because they are not under the public ownership. This is assuming that a parcel will become available for acquisition or that there's a willing landowner that would like to put it into a conservation easement, which is a big outreach project, and NGOs are really great at doing this, and local governments as well. So let's say we've preserved the land. So now we need to manage the land if it's already a native habitat. I'm talking about things like prescribed burns or enhance them. Or let's say it's non-native habitat. It needs to be restored. So these are areas that are targets because they are already in conservation easements or publicly owned. So we can say these are areas we are targeting. We are going to work on these areas. And then lastly, reservation opportunities. This is part of where some of our sea level rise modeling also works in. Reservation opportunities are areas that could be public or private, that are in the floodplain, and we're saying these would be good opportunities to allow for a buffer for sea level rise. So for instance, let's say you have a public park or a ball field that's right along a waterway. Instead of hardening that, turning it into hard development, we leave it as quote-unquote soft development. We leave it as a ball field. We leave it as grass. It doesn't necessarily need to be restored to native habitat. It just needs to be green space or not hardened space so that it's not pushing water elsewhere. It's accommodating for that rise in waters. So that was kind of an interesting concept that we really liked for this project. Okay, so now, drum roll please, this is how it applies to the Estero Bay watershed. So here is our CHNEP plan for Estero Bay. I'm starting off with this first map. This is, again, the preservation conservation opportunities. So these are lands that are not under public ownership or conservation easements within the Estero Bay watershed. I believe it is dark blue is native, light blue is non-native, and this is where soil overlay is worked in. And then you see that teal color as well. That is the panther overlay. So obviously we wanted to make sure we captured that because this is a really important area for the endangered Florida panther habitat. So you will be able to kind of see this a little bit better when I show you the next slide of our restoration and enhancement targets. But you'll notice most of the blue is relegated to the northwest corner of the watershed. So there's not a lot of the freshwater wetland areas that we were just talking about in our preservation conservation opportunities. And this is actually a good thing because, well, I don't want to ruin the surprise, but they're actually already in the restoration and habitat management portion because they've already been preserved and conserved, which is really exciting. That's a really cool thing, and it gives us a lot of hope for the future. So there are still some opportunities for conservation. This is mostly in the upland areas, and I'll talk a little bit about this later as well, but preserving these will also be important when we're talking about those ever important, creating wildlife habitat corridors, connecting the coastal with the wetland with the upland. And when I show you the larger map too, you can kind of see some examples of that throughout our CHNEP area. So anyway, we have 61,000 acres here for potential conservation, just about 27%. And again, this is accommodating for economic growth, sea level rise. And then we also have the panther habitat overlay, which is about 22,000 acres. All right. So now you can see where these two fit together. I'm going to scroll back. You see the blue, preservation, conservation, and now you see the green, the management, enhancement, and restoration targets. So you can see that these are all the areas that we were just talking about in previous presentation that are already in public ownership, in conservation easements, and this encompasses a lot of the coastal areas and freshwater wetlands. So these are more targeted for management and enhancement activities like Brad was talking about. So the light green are native. I'm sorry, let me try that again. Yeah, the light green are native, so just targeted for management and enhancement or hydrological restoration, and the dark green are non-native, targeted for restoration, like full restoration, you know, where it's just a grassy field that was supposed to be something. And this is a total of 18% of the Estero Bay watershed. Okay, so last map. These are our reservation opportunities, and you may have to squint to see these. They're a little bit smaller, and that was sort of the point. You know, we know that not everything can be left up to soft development, but we found 537 acres of parks, ball fields, et cetera, that were in the floodplain that we thought would be ideal for reserving for sea level rise. Yeah, you can kind of see them right along the coast there. Okay, so how does the Estero Bay watershed compare? So this is a map of the entire CHNEP area, well, until we actually expanded the glades in Hendry County, which is the second portion of this mapping project. But as you can see, like I was talking about those wildlife habitat corridors, if you look at the Myakka River watershed, you can see a lot of green with blue sort of adjacent to it. I wonder if I don't want to turn this off, but you can kind of see right here. You can see how the green and the blue work together. So green is already preserved, and then blue is potential preservation conservation areas. And that's kind of what we were looking to for the strategic preservation opportunities, because we wanted to be able to link up with those other created critical habitats. So Estero Bay watershed is down in the corner, and you can see where the green and the blue there, there's a good opportunity there for creating a wildlife corridor. So like I said before, there's good news in Estero. A lot of the floodplain, a lot of the freshwater wetlands areas have already been preserved. This incorporates the Edison Farms, the work from many, many partners that have been working very tirelessly in this area to preserve and conserve areas, Lake County. And this involves also the Crew areas. So as you can see, also some opportunities still exist to preserve panther habitat upland as well. Okay, so next steps. What are the next steps? Now that we've preserved the land, what do we do next? So as Brad mentioned, we need studies and modeling to decide how to best manage or enhance these lands for the following: for water supply, for flood protection, for aquifer recharge, also for habitat protection and water quality treatment. And we need a map to tell us how to best do that. The South Lake County Watershed Initiative Hydrological Modeling Project is that project. So the partnership is working to update an integrated surface groundwater model. And then next steps, CHNEP, we would like to fund basically a study to model potential future projects and to compare them and say, okay, what are the most strategic projects to complete to balance all of these needs: hydrology, water quality, environmentally sensitive flood protection, and habitat for native species. So this modeling will be really important to tell us how to take it into the future, because again, now we've preserved the land, but how do we manage it in the proper way that'll be beneficial to multiple partners? I also wanted to point out, if you are interested in hearing more about this particular project, we have some fact sheets in the back on our table if you wanted to learn more about that. And who can this information help? Well, everyone. Land use planners, ecologists, transportation planners, water resource managers, parks managers, wildlife managers, agencies, local cities, counties, and all of you, because we'll all benefit from this restoration work being done. It'll balance all of our needs. And going forward, we also hope, so right now this is in report form. We are going to put this on our CHNEP Water Atlas so that everybody can work with this interactive web maps and then look and actually zero down in on specific parcels and say, is this an area, when they're looking at opportunities, what are opportunities that they think that they should zero in on moving forward? And if you want any more information, like I mentioned previously, there's some fact sheets about the Water Atlas and the Watershed Initiative in the back, or you can go to our website and look at the full report. Thank you all.